Hello, and I am very happy to be here with you and to tell you a little bit about our open science activities and plans in 2024 and beyond. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Morane Gruenpeter. I joined Software Heritage in 2017 for a software engineering internship, and I stayed since then, and now I take care of some of the activities in open science, including the participation in the European project and the SCOS fundraising that I will talk about today. And so some of the open science activities here are to make a culture change by building this open, common, base layer infrastructure, making it possible to preserve source code, but also to connect the scholarly ecosystem and doing this connection between infrastructure using some of the standardization elements that we are pushing forward. So we're doing this, we are doing the archive, which is a mutualized infrastructure with multiple services, features and tools, specific open science products. In the coming month you might see the citation feature coming into light in the web app, bridging between communities, pushing forward towards these the suite usage, the code metadata usage, and the bibliothèque software type, connecting also with policy organization and funders to make it required, make it rewarding, and make it normative, easy and possible. Now we are building the open science pillar alongside the open access pillar for publications, the open dataset pillar for data, and we are the open source pillar for the archival of open source code, but not just open source code, publicly available code. In research, software has multiple facets. It can be a tool, it can be a research outcome or result, and it can be the object of research. We see in the 2019 Paris call that the call is to promote software development as a valuable research activity and research software as a key enabler for open science. In Software Heritage, we've divided the open science division into different layers of activities as well. We are creating opportunities at different levels, at the institutional level at INRIA, at the national level in France, the European level with the European project, but also with the EOSC task force. EOSC is for European Open Science Cloud, and at an international level in communities such as RGA and Force 11, and we are also part of the SciCodes consortium. Creating these partnerships and making sure that not only awareness and consideration are coming into play, but the adoption of software heritage as an infrastructure. Retaining these partners and members and other infrastructure that are using now software heritage to become the software heritage community as yourself, you, the software heritage ambassador, part of this community. Some of you are ambassadors in academia, but we have a larger community than the ambassador, the Deposit Partners Network. We have the Mirror Network. Some of them are also in academia and open science, and other users, researchers that are end users of the software heritage infrastructure. To cater for all of these, we have our open science software heritage features or products, depends how you want to call that. And this year we are mainly focused on this citation and bibliothèque export to have the metadata. It's actually the intrinsic metadata that will be easily accessible in the interface. So that's the one we are working at the moment. The other are the institutional portal for which we are just going to put in place a focus group to see some of the requirements for this institutional portal, and we already have the deposit in place. So the idea here is to increase the usefulness of this deposit into a certified deposit. Again, in 2024 it will only be a requirements gathering towards this certified deposit product. Now, jumping into the scholarly ecosystem, in 2020 the European Commission has published a very important work called the SEARS report, SEARS for Scholarly Infrastructure for Research Software. This report has introduced 4 pillars: archive, reference, describe, and cite. In this report you can find a very thorough and interesting state-of-the-art of the ecosystem and the road ahead, with requirements, recommendation, and 13 workflows showing the connection between different types of infrastructure and different scenarios for these connections into the software heritage archive. Now, when you look at software in academia doesn't live alone. I really like this XCCD, XCACD meme showing that maybe some very little part on which all of these other parts is built over is quite fragile and might disappear. And when you look at the software stack, that more than just research software, you can find this in the Conrad Hinson software collapse diagram, where above the hardware you have the operating system, the non-scientific infrastructure, the scientific infrastructure that might be preserved and catered by the scholarly infrastructure, then more specifically domain-specific tools and project-specific code that has a real role to be archived and to be registered in specific scholarly infrastructure. So software heritage as the universal social archive is taking care of much more than just research software. This might be something that you already know, but when talking about software heritage, this is very important to differentiate the fact that we can archive any code. And so if you decide to also archive the dependency on which you are built, software heritage can provide the infrastructure to archive this software. One of our very important success stories is the HAL and software heritage connection with the CCSD and partners inside the INRIA Research Center US INRIA. We have collaborated to make this possible to deposit software in HAL that is transferred to software heritage by using code metadata and referencing the software with the SWID. Since 2023, the SWID deposit is available on all instances where a software researcher can work in a forge somewhere online, then save the code, and by using the SWID, the researcher comes into HAL and gives the SWID metadata, which is then moderated by a digital archivist moderator, and after validation is then published online. And then you have the HAL identifier, which is an extrinsic identifier registered in the HAL archive, and the software hash ID for the specific directory that was referenced during this deposit. Under the hood, we had our deposit administration view open for our deposit members, who can come and see what has happened to the deposit that they have submitted. Some can be, as you see, rejected. There's a possibility to have a status detail to see what happened there. This view is actually closed. It's only for the current partner that we have, for which are eLife, HAL, and IPO in the coming month. Other will join on production. I will tell you a little bit more about that in a second, because we have partnerships for open science with European projects. Some of our past projects, which I won't take any time to describe what happened there, are EOSC Pillar and FAIRS Fair, which ended in 2022. Now we have two major fair, EOSC, which is European Open Science Cloud project with the FairCo for EOSC and Fair Impact. In FairCo for EOSC, we have a full work package with the partners that are here on the slide. So we are in REA, but we have with us SW Math, we have CERN, we have GVDG, DataSite, Open Air, Dance, GRNet, and DAX2 to create, develop APIs and connectors. So RSAC is for research software, APIs and connectors between software heritage and these infrastructure for archival, reference, description, and citation. Also planned in 2025 is the prod release of this component and a new mirror in Greece on the GRNet infrastructure. For Fair Impact, we have published the research software metadata guidelines in 2023. Recently, we have now a code repository with the guidelines which you can fork and adapt to your institution or community. We are also contributing to the Code Meta initiative, and some recent news is that we have released the V3 of the vocabulary, the Code Meta vocabulary. This is a joint venture between the two projects because they are very close and work in parallel. So that's the planning for that's also a very kind of a behind the scenes view, working closely with the Fair Impact and FairCo for EOSC. The upcoming deliverable is here in month 28 during September, and in 2025, as I said, we have the deployment in production of the components and the mirror deployment. In Fair Impact, we have just launched in May an open call for research software. Some ambassadors have been joining this open call, and we are going to focus on Code Meta in this open call and how to implement the research software metadata guidelines. In 2023, we had the Deposit Sprint, the research software APIs and connectors Deposit Sprint, where partners came to Paris and enjoyed some brainstorming over the deposit features and components and how to interoperate with software heritage. We had with that sprint the big deposit puzzle, and now all of these partners are part of our deposit network. One of the very important part of this sprint that I wanted to share with you today is the documentation, because some of the work that we are doing now is identifying the users and the readers of the documentation. So when we did that for the deposit partners, we did that more about looking at who is the reader of the documentation to deposit in the infrastructure, but it is also an activity that we are trying to launch now to identify who are our readers of the software heritage documentation, if this documentation is useful, and how to make it better. Now, as I said, 6 subcomponents are being developed and now are in beta release. You can see the beta demo on these links, and we have Invenio RDM beta release, which is a work by CERN and will be also accessible on the Zenodo instance of Invenio RDM. So for those, so most of you don't know, but Zenodo has an engine which is called Invenio RDM. This is quite new because before a year ago it wasn't the case. They moved to their community software, which is in Venue RDM. Here for Dataverse, it's actually an instance run by Dan, so it won't be in the full Dataverse project, this connector. Dagstuhl is a publisher or a platform for publisher where we will have this connection, and they have produced some very nice interface to create code meta and to save code in software heritage. Episciences is a platform by the CCSD in close collaboration with AL, where already we have in production the possibility to reference a SWID on an article that is submitted to the Episciences platform. So these are for open access publishers and these scholarly aggregators. We have SW Math and OpenAir, which are providing this connection between software records and software heritage. Moving to the research of the metadata guidelines that also was produced by the FAIR, one of these European projects. Here it's FAIR Impact. In these guidelines we have identified 7 aspects with the general metadata requirements, the accessibility and preservation aspect, reference and identification, description and classification, attribution and credit, reuse, licensing and legal aspects, and finally we execute dependencies and execution environment, comparing to the SEERS report pillars and to the FAIR for research software principles. So we have this kind of mapping covering a little bit more than these two other reports. So you can find it now, as I said, on the code repository. We need the help of the community, so we need your help, and Sabrina has asked you via the ambassadors mailing to contribute and volunteer to be a tester. We need tester because sometimes we develop product features that are not what the user needs, and I have now a cat as well, so I know that a user needs, as seen in this picture, is very different from what I can provide to my user. So if you are keen to check what has happened on one of these platforms, please come forward, volunteer, share when you are available. You don't need to be available immediately. We'll have different round of testing. It can be also testing features that are not the connectors, but for example, in a few weeks we might have some beta testing of the citation feature that we want to provide. So your help would be much appreciated. So if you can share in the chat that you want to contribute, we will take this information and use it and come back to you. I will take it and I will come back to you. Another project that we have launched in January 2024, so very recently, is the software project run and led by CORE. The goal is to establish a machine-assisted workflow embedded into widely used open scholarly infrastructure to assist researchers in identifying, describing, registering, and linking and archiving research software. So these are all these steps when a researcher here is depositing software and then is also submitting a manuscript into an open access repository. This article might have a mention of a software, so there will be some machine learning to identify the mention and then get this mention into maybe see if we find a URL or if it's a SWID. So another process can be then done to have this metadata exposed on the software record. If this software wasn't archived yet, it will be then registered or submitted to the Safe Code Now, and a SWID will be can be pulled from software heritage. So that's so far it just started. Stay tuned. I might have more news for you in the coming month or maybe next year when we move forward with this project. The last maybe part of this project is the implication into the code meta community and improving the situation now with code meta. So some news from 2023: we have moved to a community governance model with a project management committee. The version 3 was released, so that's a big win. We have now also SPDX to code meta mapping, and we have a new open identifier, because before code meta was identified with a DOI, now we have a W3 ID. There are some very interesting discussion about identification of the more granularity into the metadata vocabulary of code meta. And what you might not know about code meta is that there's a very large crosswalk table having different vocabularies mapped to code meta, which is something very valuable to us in software heritage, because we index metadata and we want to discover metadata in very different forms in intrinsic metadata files, and we do this effort by translating the metadata into code meta so it can be searched over. A little note is that the citation feature will only use metadata files, intrinsic metadata files that are all code meta or citation.cff, and will not use other package managers files at this first stage of this citation feature. Other indicators in academia which are not directly related to the European projects are very nice, with the citation that we already have, this bibliothèque, and inclusion in the ASC MART, the replicability stamp, which is also an amazing success story, where when software record is shown in the Computer Graphic Replicability Stamp initiative, you have it archived in software heritage using the Save Code Now. And of course the Geeks, we cannot say anything without Geeks, first free software distribution backed by a stable archive, making reproducible research papers possible. On the policy side, I won't read it, but there are also very nice advancement in this area. And so now, with a bit delay, I'm going to move quickly to the SCOS fundraising part, where we're being recognized by the Global Sustainability Coalition for Open Science Services, in short SCOS, for the 5th pledging round. So that started in November 2023. For that, we are now part of the SCOS family, connected to these other infrastructures that were also selected. And the idea of SCOS is that they are giving us this kind of badge, where we are now pushed forward into these funding cycles, getting support from consortiums or individual institutions. We propose this model where our levels, support levels, are lower than the sponsor program, with the paper at 2,000 euros, wood at 4,000 euros, copper at 8,000 euros, and then we enter the same level as the sponsor program with bronze, silver and gold. When a consortium is created, if it as a group, if it's the collective has gathered one of these higher level support, they will also be recognized and benefit the sponsor status. And one of the benefits of supporting software heritage is being part of this archives and libraries interest group, getting dedicating information, and it's really a forum to discuss software source code preservation for libraries, with the possibilities that are offered to these to this community. So I said what all I had to say about this. Something very new from a few days ago is that we now have this members league page. If you want to share that in your institution or in your community, there's a page directly in Software Heritage and not only in the SCOS website. And just recently, so this is why the slide is looking awful, is that we have announced in May 2024 this first consortium that is supporting Software Heritage through this SCOS fundraising cycle. It's CRKN, which is the Canadian Research Knowledge Network, and we are very grateful for this network to have communicated our information and getting pledges. So we have the Memorial University of Newfoundland, Université de Montréal, University of Toronto, York University, University of Saskatchewan, if I'm saying that correctly, apologies about that, University of New Brunswick, and Western University. So this is the very, very recent news. It is a community-driven effort. Everything is done as a community effort, and I want to thank you, specifically our ambassadors, that are making this community effort worthwhile, because it's really interesting to see how this community is evolving. We have here the pictures from our last event in February the community workshop in January, but the symposium in February 2024, and we are very grateful for your participation and engagement in our community, pushing software heritage forward, making it adopted in your community. And so we do feel that we are getting further together, and I hope that you feel that you have you are bringing to the table what you can bring and getting back what you need to your community. And so behind the scenes, but you might know us, we have a dedicated and engaged team. This is the 2023 image. This team will grow quickly because we are recruiting now. Something that I can ask from you, and maybe Benoit will ask that later, is to communicate the fact that we are hiring at the moment. There are 2 or more open positions in the engineering team, in DevOps, and maybe a data scientist, but I'm not sure. So that's more. Benoit has more information about that. And I want to thank you and give this time for your questions. But before I give the floor back and take the floor maybe from another location, is that if you have ideas about strategies that we can use to communicate better and get more adoption of the infrastructure, so software heritage, from other researchers, from other users, and from other infrastructure that can be similar to the ones that we are developing now with the Research Software APIs and connectors, so the FAIRCO for EOS project, we really would like your input about that. So I would be very interested in the chat, if you can take a second or maybe more to give your input about what could be a place where we can come present software heritage or ideas of improvement to have more impact in adoption. I want to thank you again, and I hope that's it for now. So giving you, Sabrina, back the floor.